And welcome back to another episode of the Startup Junkies podcast. My name is Caleb Talley. I'm the Director of Marketing and Events here at Startup Junkie, and I'm joined by my co-host, Jeff Amorine, the founder of Startup Junkie and the genius here on the board who's going to provide us with our graybeard color commentary, as he said. But our special guest today is Tyler Elm with Blue and Green. Tyler, thank you so much for joining us today. Tell us, what is Blue and Green?
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Blue and Green is a water clean tech company. Its core competency is dissolving gases into liquids. And the primary application of that is in water treatment. Both drinking water treatment and wastewater treatment are our primary markets. There's municipal applications and processed water applications for industry. We're in a lot of different markets and different applications. Probably more than you need to know to kick things off.
No, that's great. And talk a little bit about your journey, a little of your background and how you came to Blue and Green originally.
Geez, that's a long story.
You can start at Genesis if you want, but skip most of the Hubagat section.
Well, I was actually, I've been in Arkansas since 2005. Before that, I was in Florida. Before that, I was in Vancouver, Canada. In Vancouver, Canada, I was a strategy consultant with PricewaterhouseCoopers, and later I was consulting. And my core area of focus was industrial markets, and really back in the 90s, how to incorporate sustainability into business strategy. One of my clients was Office Depot. They were looking for a global business sustainability strategy back in the day. I developed that for them while at Office Depot. PricewaterhouseCoopers. They said, great, love it, now come implement it. So I moved to the US in 2003, did that for Office Depot for a couple of years. And then I was fortunate enough to be recruited by Walmart and launched their sustainability strategy in 2005. I say fortunate enough because I really enjoy the Arkansas area, the seasons, the mountain biking, it's just a beautiful place. I worked for Walmart for a few years, and then actually started working in a venture group for the vice chairman. Looked at energy and sustainability issues for the company, how to launch new businesses for them that would scale, and did that. And then I was recruited by Canada's largest retailer, Canadian Tire Corporation, to again do a development of a sustainability strategy for them. Did that for 5 years while living here in Northwest Arkansas, flying up every Monday and back Thursday night, working from home Friday. Unbelievably, I did that for 5 years. Then started consulting for a little bit on my own, including to my old company. And then I had an opportunity. My old boss was head of strategy at Canadian Tire, is now the CEO of AAA Mountain West region in the US. And very interesting job there. He hired me to develop an innovation lab that could help AAA launch new businesses that would fill the gap in their revenue that was coming as a result of all sorts of interesting things like increasingly autonomous vehicles, demographic changes in the use of driving and things like that. So I did that for about a year and set up the innovation lab, hired about 20 people, got a number of companies up and going, and then came back to Arkansas after about a year. Lower Mainland, I'm sorry, the Bay Area just wasn't that really for me, and I really enjoyed living in Northwest Arkansas. My wife is here, of course, and she's got a job, a career. So actually, Jeff, I came knocking on your door and saying, what's going on here in the entrepreneurial sector? I hear so much good things about Northwest Arkansas and entrepreneurship and small business. And one of the companies you said was to look at was Blue and Green. And then coincidentally, I got a call from them the next week. The Blue and Green is a product of applied research that came out of U of A and Texas A&M. There are a couple of professors there. Started the company in 2004 at the incubator here in Northwest Arkansas. And in 2018, there was a management shuffle, and the new CFO was actually someone I worked with at Walmart. And within a few months of him coming on board, they contacted me, and I loved what I saw, the potential. The innovation was incredible. Clearly something that can disrupt the market. And so I joined, and it's been a wonderful ride ever since. That's been a couple of years now.
And you've had some recent significant milestones. And by way of background, for those people that don't understand that market, the sort of water purification, wastewater, industrial wastewater market, it's a bit of a stodgy vertical. It's tough to sell into, long-standing relationships, hard to adopt new technology. But you've got this amazing milestone recently of having your 100th installation. Talk about how, because I know you're kind of principally involved in the business development and growing the markets and whatnot. Talk about how you were able to get that done, because I know it's a slog in some of these vertical markets.
Yeah, I would say that, how would I characterize it? I would characterize the majority of the core market as being very pragmatic, very conservative. It traditionally takes a long time for water technology to scale. For example, UV disinfection took over 100 years to achieve 100 installations. We've been fortunate enough to achieve that in a fraction of the time. I would say that, the way you define a market segment is very interesting too. A market segment by definition really is self-referencing and needs a conservative pragmatist. They have critical infrastructure, water treatment, wastewater treatment. They don't want to be left holding the bag. And so they tend to self-reference to what other pragmatists in the industry are using. And it's very rare for them to accept references from technology enthusiasts and early adopters that aren't in the core of the main market. So one of the things we did the first installation was sold into the municipal market back in 2008. And one of the things we did to accelerate penetration into industrial markets was we expanded the reference of those core primary buyers in the main market of industrial markets. We created a cross-reference to buyers in the municipal market. So you have a technology that's been widely adopted in the municipal market for over a decade. And what we did was we highlighted similar use cases in the municipal market as were in the industrial market and facilitated that cross-reference. And it's a classic approach of fast follower, where the preceding industry or market segment has taken a lot of the risk out of the scaling because you've got the data, you've got the experience. And so you essentially have pragmatists speaking with pragmatists, but you're just bridging the gap in references from one market segment to another. And that's been quite successful over the last couple of years. So now we see actually a couple of very interesting trends. We see CO2 driving our scale. So we've got one core technology for dissolving gases into liquids. And we have a product portfolio that is differentiated based on what gas is injected for what purpose. So we have an oxygen application where for biological treatment, for environmental remediation, just general wastewater management as well. We've got another one which injects CO2, and that's for recarbonation, drinking water, water softening. It's to replace harsh acids, but it's pH control, things like that. And then we have odor control. It's another oxygen application, and then of course disinfection using ozone, which is an extremely strong disinfectant. So what we've been trying to do is scale certain technologies in certain markets based on high value opportunities for the customer, so that drive a strong ROI, and applications that really leverage our core competencies of being able to treat more water with less energy and have a smaller footprint.
With your 100th installation just put in, how much water do you think y'all treat in a day on average?
I think our numbers are a little out of date. 2 years ago, I think we were at 50 installations, and then we were treating over 1 billion gallons a day. Now we've got over, I think we've got about 70 installations up and running, and we've got another 24, 25 in production. So the number is, if not more than 2 billion gallons of water collectively treated a day, close to it. But right now we're just saying over 1 billion because that's the last time we verified the numbers.
If you had golden arches, you'd be able to have, billions and billions served on there, right?
Yeah,
have that under the logo, right? Billions and billions of gallons clean.
Ticker tape.
Exactly. Oh, that's very cool.
So,
And you just said 2 years ago you had 50 installations, so you've doubled that in this.
Yeah, our cumulative annual growth rate, our CAGR right now is 45% in the last few years. Since then, we've also made the Inc. 5000 list of most fastest growing companies in the U.S. private companies, and our growth rate's been 203% over that period.
That's fantastic to see.
200 installations end of next year, 2 years from now.
We can hope for sure.
You're not ready to sign up for that sales quota just yet, are you?
Not quite yet. I think we're focused on scaling within our U.S. municipal market, our U.S. industrial market, different applications in those different markets. But strategy is trade-offs. So I think there's 11 or 12 people right now, and we can only do so much. So we're focused right now on the platforms that really have momentum in those respective markets and are really driving the scaling. In terms of international business development, we're really focused on Brazil right now because a lot of market circumstances. I think only 80% of the population has access to clean drinking water. Only 50% of the population has sanitation. It's a political year next year in terms of the presidency. One of the governors that's running for the presidency, his platform is based on clean water and sanitation for people. And so there's that, as well as the pandemic, because the SARS-CoV-2 virus is in the digestive tract as well as the respiratory tract. Domestic wastewater is huge viral loads. And as such, with the situation with sanitation down there, not only are domestic wastewater workers at risk, like they are here, from potential infection through the creation of aerosols during wastewater treatment, but down there you also have the virus. It's capable of living in the environment for up to 12 days. So you have the large viral loads in the rivers, the streams, and even the reservoirs from which the drinking water is taken. So it's a big opportunity down there. They've had some regulatory changes. They're trying to achieve in the next 13 years what they haven't been able to achieve in the last 50 years. They're really going to performance contracts, which is inviting hundreds of millions of dollars of investment, or billions actually, and the privatization of the water sector. So very interesting, very dynamic, very exciting. I'm very happy to be in the right place at the right time.
And do you go to market direct, or do you have subsidiaries or partners, distribution partners? How do you see that happening in Brazil?
Down there or up here?
In Brazil.
In Brazil, the nature of the environment is a very protectionist market. So there's a lot of taxes. You would double the cost of your technology just to bring it into the market. So there's that issue. You really have to have a strong value proposition, and you have to have a good partner. You can't just. It takes a while to set up a company there. The best way to go is through a strategic partner, or at the very least a distributor. So that's what we're doing right now.
And so you talked about the impact of COVID on, you know, the wastewater. How has that impacted from a sales perspective when you look at municipalities or, you know, those that you would normally reach out to that aren't really doing anything, that, you know, spent the last few months kind of, you know, city offices are closed, or, you know, have y'all run into any issues there from a sales perspective?
This is so new that we have not as yet. I would say that the market is responding to our consistent ability to increase treatment capacity, improve water quality while reducing life cycle costs, operational risk, physical energy, and carbon footprint. The whole COVID work health and safety really hasn't emerged yet, but there's a couple of situations. Our oxygen S-Stox solution that dissolves oxygen into water to create a supersaturated solution that speeds up the natural biological process of treating waste. We do that in a side stream process in a pressurized vessel, and we dissolve oxygen at the molecular level. Conventional technologies splash water into the air, force bubbles at high velocity through the water, which creates a lot of aerosols. So wastewater workers are at risk of that, you know, that vector of transmission. Our differentiation is that we don't create aerosols, we don't create bubbles. And so there's definitely a benefit. It hasn't come to the market yet, but I suspect it will. And then the other thing is, as mentioned in both, particularly Brazil, but also here, having the virus in the wastewater, disinfection is extremely important. In Brazil, both the government, academics, and practitioners are saying we need the strongest oxidant possible, and that just happens to be ozone. I see that starting to happen in the U.S. as well. We're very fortunate that our technology has been implemented at the Fayetteville wastewater treatment plant here in town. And it's one of the leading facilities in the world in terms of treating with ozone in our system. And we've demonstrated the ability to kill viruses, bacteria, and take a broad array of emerging contaminants that UV or chlorine can't do. In fact, we even replaced the UV system there. So we're able to take, by emerging contaminants, I'm talking about pharmaceutical compounds, hormones, fire retardants, all sorts of stuff that, you know, traditional wastewater plants haven't evolved to tackle, simply because it's unregulated. But those regulations are coming, and that will drive adoption. So if you live in Fayetteville, you're very lucky to have a good water source and good water treatment.
Yeah, those post-chlorination byproducts, a lot of people don't realize that there's lots of stuff in there that's not EPA regulated that we're all exposed to if you don't have the benefit of something like the ozone treatment that you all described.
Exactly. And in countries like Latin America in general, and countries like Brazil, they do all of their disinfection, both primary and secondary, if they have secondary, for drinking water and wastewater with chlorine. And it's producing all of these carcinogens, essentially. And what ozone does, you know, addresses a lot of those issues, particularly our secondary and your wastewater disinfection. You don't produce those carcinogens, and you're treating a broader array of contaminants. So there's a big opportunity in Brazil to actually leapfrog UV and be the disinfection of choice as those systems get implemented.
Well, in a case like that, when you have an election taking place, you know, and one candidate has a regulatory agenda that is very helpful, do y'all go on and make Facebook ads for that president?
No, we haven't done that quite yet. What we have been doing, we are getting the word out to the early adopters, the large water utility companies, public utilities, as well as the private, and just letting them know. Again, what we're trying to do is the same thing we did with the food and beverage industry here and the municipal industry, try to have that cross-referencing. So just, you know, Brazil in general tends to be self-referencing. They reference what others within that geographic market segment are using. And so what we're trying to do is build bridges to references in the U.S. And that seems to be working.
Tyler, I'll ask you an unfair question, and feel free to dodge if you want. But now that you're starting to get some really significant traction and breaking into new markets and whatnot, is there a point in time where an Ecolab or a large global engineering company comes along and says, we got to have that in the portfolio? What do you think if it, and again, not to be bound by any of this, but putting on your strategy hat, if you were to say sometime in the next 5 years, one of these big guys that you're disrupting is going to take an interest, what would be your take on that? What would that look like?
So basically you're asking what's our exit strategy?
A little bit, in kind of a roundabout, not very articulate way. Yes.
So I would say that there is a tremendous opportunity to scale this business and create value by teaming up with a strategic partner, whether that be the nature of that relationship, whether it be equity-based or not. Doesn't really matter so much. I think what's important is having access to a big strategic distribution, marketing, so that we can continue doing what we're doing, but not have to make the strategic trade-offs that we're currently doing to scale in specific markets with the results we have. We're definitely capital constrained right now, and the markets that we want to go after, if we have treatment service, which is new to North America, very established in other countries and geographies like Latin America. It's very popular here, we found in the last 2 years, but you need human resources to execute that, and you need capital to have systems on standby and ready to go. So we've got half a dozen systems right now on that treatment as a service, and it's very, very effective at reducing the customer's perceived risk of adopting a technology. So what we can do is we say, okay, if you want to try for 6 months, performance contract, we'll reduce your operating costs by, we'll reduce your energy costs, we'll reduce your chemical costs, we'll make it safer for your workers, and then after 6 months, you can always buy one, or a year. So we have that treatment as a service, I think can really take off under a strategic partner that can bring capital and human resources to the table.
Well, it's predictable. If you get a bunch of that, it's like with any subscription, it's kind of predictable to forecast, and it hits an OpEx versus a CapEx line, I would imagine too. So there might be different approvals. Is that all true for something that's this capital intensive?
Yeah, I would say that we're giving the customer the opportunity to either tap a capital budget or an operational budget. In some applications, the operational savings cover more than the capital costs very quickly. And so one can always do that. Mm-hmm. Now, if you think of the industrial perspective, you've got the core competency of a company, whether it's producing chickens or, whatever it is, that's their core competency. And then wastewater really has never been seen as a differentiator, a strategic differentiator, of course, because it's, sort of the back end of the whole value chain for them. But the opportunity, so you're always competing for that capital with the core business. And that's a very tough position to be in. Mm-hmm. So the treatment as a service does enable non-core aspects of the business to have the latest and greatest technology and engineering expertise and financed through operational savings. So it's nice to have both options. And we're also seeing with climate change, we're seeing it driving business for us in seasonal. So for example, nutrient removal like nitrogen from wastewater can be negatively affected during cold weather, and general biological wastewater treatment can be negatively affected in hot weather. So in industries that have experienced tremendous amounts of growth, let's say like the meat processing industry that's increased 300% in the last few years, and their wastewater treatment hasn't kept up, because we can treat more wastewater in a smaller footprint, we can bring extra capacity to the table for them, which doesn't constrain their core business's production. And that can be either seasonal or as they outgrow their facilities. It's a wonderful place to be right now.
You know, the alternative side of that is, I guess the classic way is a large strategic partner comes along and they take some kind of investment interest. Eventually, it's an acquisition. But you set the table with a really interesting management team that's well seasoned now, and you've got this traction. It seems like an alternative would be you go get a good private equity player that's got really significant interest in this space, and you pick off some other folks that have related technologies or that are in customer segments where you're not, and you do kind of a roll-up strategy. I realize there may be greater risk with that, but you all seem like a management team that could take on more, that could grow with a bigger play.
Yeah, definitely. We could take on more. We would hire, we're already looking for more engineers. If there are people out there that are co-op opportunities or just graduating that have experience in, water, environmental, civil engineering, there's some opportunities there. But, it's a $75 billion global market. We're definitely going to need people. And, I think the strategic partner will definitely help us address more of that market as we go along. If you think of what we do, we really just, our core competency is dissolving gases into liquids. There can be a whole system of solutions for different issues, and we can be just a component part that increases the efficiency and the profitability of a larger entity that might need our part. But we also have standalone applications, whether that be environmental remediation of rivers, lakes, reservoirs, distributed ozonation, distributed water treatment. All of these things are starting to come into play to complement the centralized system, especially in countries like Latin America where they don't have the infrastructure in place already.
Gotcha.
Tyler, changing our direction a little bit, you provide a unique perspective that we don't necessarily always have on the podcast. We feature a lot of founders and seldom have somebody that joined forces with a startup to bring their expertise to help that startup really grow. For those who, are considering the opportunity of working with a startup, what would you tell somebody about that experience? And, maybe they're on the fence about, sometimes, it's going to be scary considering working for a startup, working with a startup to help them grow. What would you tell them?
I wouldn't count on the equity play. What I would count on is in the quality of the work, how much you're learning, how collaborative the team is. Satisfaction, self-actualization is a big part, I think, of working in a startup. And I think that's important. I think the approach to innovation is also important. Innovation is more a novel idea. The innovation has to address a problem or create an opportunity. Then that problem either has to be very large and be associated with a large amount of value from solving it, or be very chronic and aggravating, and therefore have a source of of value. So that's an important part of innovation within a business context. And I would also say to look at the company in terms of how it's innovating. And it's not just about technology innovation. There's process innovation and the approaches that at Bloomgreen, the approaches we employ to create business value. So I guess we would call our source of innovation from a technologies perspective, platform innovation, where you've got new product development that leverages a common set of components, assembly methods, technologies, operational data. Something that's got that sort of platform for innovation from a technology can scale much faster and create a broader portfolio of solutions and IP than one that does not have that platform innovation approach. What you bring to market, we've got our oxygen solutions for water treatment. We've got our, for biological treatment, we've got our disinfection with high DAWs, we've got our pH control, etc. All of them have to create value or create an opportunity, and how you bring them to market, whether that's treatment as a service, whether it's a capital sale. So again, innovating on not only what they're bringing to market, how they're bringing in the market, and who their customers are. You know, Blue Green used to be a company of engineers selling to engineers. Now we engage the entire company, because the idea of business sustainability, which is what I've worked on for almost 30 years now, being economic benefits from improved environmental and social outcomes, our core value proposition is do more with less. So more treatment, better water quality with less risk, less cost, less environmental footprint, less physical footprint. All of those things really tap into the core business now. It's not just wastewater or drinking water. It's not just something off to the side. It talks to the brand of the core business. So you look at a company like Tyson Foods. They've got an objective to reduce their water use and their greenhouse gas footprint over the next few years. Well, here's something that ties into those corporate values, those strategic imperatives, and those budgets. So I would say, are they innovating on the process? Are they innovating on their offerings? Are they innovating on the customers? What are the points of presence in the market? So look holistically, but I would say, once again, don't focus on the equity opportunity, focus on the job satisfaction of being around collaborative people doing really good stuff that helps society. I mean, that's what I focus on.
That was kind of a fantastic answer. I mean, the idea of being diligent, essentially doing your due diligence on the culture and the approach they take and the positioning in the market. I think that oftentimes that's overlooked. People might try to boil it down to, is it a nice to have or a must have? But you gave a pretty compelling answer for somebody that has subject matter expertise that could have led you anywhere, really. I mean, you had lots of choices.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the thing I didn't realize, and probably a lot of the early investors in Blue Green didn't realize, is how long it takes to scale a technology in that pragmatic, conservative, risk-averse culture.
Yeah.
Someone with a compliance mindset is not really, the idea of innovation to someone in a compliance mindset is like, why would I stick my head up? Only to get it knocked down. So, it's been 15 years, 16 years now since the company was formed. And we're just now disrupting the market. But that is very quick for the water process industry and water treatment industry.
That's super interesting as well. I used to joke when I sold into another kind of stayed vertical into transportation, people would say, what's the one thing you would say about that? And I'd say, well, the sales process was somewhere between 6 months and infinity. And I was never really quite sure where, but it was another place where you had some leaders that kind of set the direction for the whole industry. And if you didn't get in those leaders, those leading kind of client accounts, it was impossibly difficult to build a good business. And a lot of it was really driven by compliance, as you said. If we have to do it, we'll do it. If we don't have to do it and it's just a good idea, we might not care about the economics. We might not do it because there's too much risk. Nobody ever got fired by going with the existing convention, that same kind of mindset. So I think that insight is hugely valuable for both founders and for people that want to take part in providing innovative new solutions into these sort of staid, pragmatic industry segments.
Yeah, very much so. And, in running that innovation lab at West, it was a combination of, things like cars, but it was mostly that blended with a digital platform. So, for example, a car sharing network. And it's all, people joke that millennials, their primary mode of transportation is their cell phone. In San Francisco, where's the closest car? I'm going to get in it and go. But the same process that people apply for in the digital world, where you try before you buy a piece of software, our treatment as a service has really helped us get into those markets and reduce that perceived customer risk through performance-based contracting. So I think that whatever field you're in, understanding, who you're selling to and how to get traction, reduce risks for those new customers, that's an important part of it.
Well, I think we're about at the point where I could talk about this forever and just geek out because I think it's so interesting, and the perspective you bring from strategy and innovation is great, but we're about to the point where we need to land the plane. If we now have listeners in over 100 countries, which is amazing. And maybe one or two people in some of these countries, we don't know, but we'll take credit for it. We've got over 100 country footprint. If they want to find out more about what you're doing, what Blue and Green is doing, what's the best way for them to find out?
Blueandgreen.com. There's a website. If you want the latest news on blueandgreen.com, I would say our news tab has a lot of links that you can read everything we've released, and we've released quite a bit lately and more to come. We also have our treatment as a service business that can be accessed through Blue and Green, but also big services is a place to go for that. And we feature more than we do on Blue and Green. It's just a matter of the pace at which we're growing right now. Both websites don't necessarily contain all the same information, but the Big Aeration Services website really has a lot more on our market positioning with respect to sustainability.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Tyler, thanks so much for coming on. It's been a great conversation. It's great catching up, and it's really cool to see that initial conversation and some of the discussions we had, and see all the good things that you're doing for a company that we hope will be one of those pillars of the innovation economy in Northwest Arkansas for a long time to come. So thank you so much.
We hope to be so. It's been my pleasure. Thanks
Absolutely.
very much.
Sure thing. We'll see you. Take it easy.